Joe Burrow has quickly become one of the most marketable and popular quarterbacks in the NFL. However, as much hype as he's received, he really hasn't seemed like he has what it takes to become a consistent top 5 quarterback in the NFL. When he is playing his best game, there is no doubt that he is one of the best QBs in the league, but why is it that he struggles so much with being able to consistently put up those types of performances? Today I wanted to break down Joe Burrow and point out exactly what changes he needs to make to actually take his game to the next level and become a perennial top 5 QB in the league. The first thing I want to address is Joe Burrow's biggest strengths on the field. I really do feel like he is a few small changes away from being elite. One thing he has never really struggled with is accuracy. His ball placement on routes is always one of the best in the league, and considering he now has a few NFL seasons under his belt, I want to point out that he is actually up 104 touchdowns to 38 interceptions in his career. It's not a matter of not being able to place the ball where he wants it to go, and I do think this is the thing that has given him the most success in the league. This accuracy also comes with a 68% completion rate, which ranks pretty highly in the league. There is no doubt in my mind that he has the arm to be an elite QB. He just is missing one or two pieces to his game. The most obvious to me is his lack of arm strength compared to some other elite quarterbacks. While he is deadly accurate and can tear you apart in the short game, once routes start progressing past the 20-yard mark, his stats take a huge dive. While there are quarterbacks who definitely prioritize the short game like Tom Brady, most of Joe Burrow's career interceptions come from long passes that are overthrown or just off their mark. If he could find a way to use his elite accuracy while also working on his deep ball game, the Bengals' offense would become much more dangerous. When you compare Joe Burrow's arm strength to QBs like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or even Justin Herbert, it's obvious that he does not have the same ability on the deep ball. This is especially noticeable when the Bengals are in a position where they need to make explosive plays to make up for a large lead for the opposing team. When the Bengals get out to an early lead and don't need to be focused on making huge plays down the field, they have a huge ability to close out games. However, the lack of arm strength gives them an uphill battle when it comes to getting back into games that have turned into a blowout. There are plenty of drills and coaching he can use to improve this. I don't want any Bengals fans to think I don't believe he is capable of making the changes. Honestly, overall in his game, there is not a huge list of weaknesses to pick out. This is just one of the most obvious. The other obvious issue Joe Burrow has had in his career is that fact he is injury prone. I know some people want to argue this until the cows come home. However, one thing that isn't up for discussion is statistics. In his rookie year, he suffered a season-ending knee injury, and last season suffered an injury during training camp and another injury in week 11 that took him out for the season. Even if he is able to be a consistent top 5 QB in the league, it doesn't really matter if half the time in the playoffs he is unable to play. When Joe Burrow can remain healthy, he is incredible, but for some reason it seems like his body does not want to comply. I do think after last season's injury, he at least started to understand how important it was to protect his body. This year, he has been much better about avoiding hits and being willing to throw the ball away instead of trying to extend plays. He has to realize that as much as he wants to be the hero, being taken out for the season does nothing for the Bengals. What I think was pretty overlooked when he was a prospect coming out of LSU is the fact that he has been injury prone even before joining the league. In 2017, he suffered a wrist fracture when he was a redshirt player at Ohio State. In 2020, he had a chest rib fracture while at LSU, and he has other small injuries through his career. The best comparison for Joe Burrow is a glass cannon. When it works, it's great, but there is a high likelihood he is going to be broken. What's hard about this weakness is from a training perspective, there isn't really too much he can do. Sure, he can try to avoid hits and play smarter football, but there are no players in the NFL that can manage to avoid literally every big hit that comes their way. Something in his body seems especially susceptible to season-ending injuries. It's one thing when you see a QB like Aaron Rodgers, who is almost as old as Father Time, getting injured regularly, but in my opinion, Joe Burrow is far too young to be dealing with season-ending injuries on a regular basis. If this trend continues, I could see him being one of the biggest what-if questions in football history. What if the Bengals would have had a healthy Joe Burrow every year? Statistically, he has had a great career so far, but I also wanted to break down how his first few years compared to all-time greats like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. I am only going to use years where he actually played the full season, but in 2021, Joe Burrow had 4,600 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. In Peyton Manning's second year, he had 4,100 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions. I really do think this shows that he absolutely has all the talent in the world necessary to make the transition to a Peyton Manning-like quarterback. If it wasn't for his tendency to be taken out at the end of the season by injury, I think this conversation could be framed entirely differently. For the Tom Brady comparison, in their third year as starters, Tom had 3,700 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions, while Joe had 4,400 yards and 34 touchdowns respectively. Once again, if you are having better stats early in your career than absolute legends, then you are on the right path. I think one difference between Brady and Burrow that is important to note is their consistency. Brady consistently put up performances that his team needed to win games. Joe Burrow, for comparison, feels a lot more streaky as a player. He will have a game where he absolutely balls out and completes 70% of his passes for 400 yards, just to throw for 203 yards the next week. This season is the best example of the difference between consistent quarterback play and just padding stats. In week 1, the Bengals looked like a chicken with their head cut off. Against the Browns, Burrow was good for just 164 yards and no touchdowns. That is a stat line I would expect to see out of Justin Fields, not a top 5 QB in the league. In week 2, he came out and threw for 258 yards and 2 touchdowns. In week 3, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And in week 4, 232 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sure, the last 3 weeks look like a true star quarterback, but it seems like in 3 or 4 games a year, Joe Burrow just disappears entirely. Sure, the Bengals can still have a winning record and have a playoff run, but it would be much better for the team if he could do a better job of staying consistent. In 2023, he had the same issue. In week 1, he had just 82 passing yards. In week 4, he was good for just 165 yards. And it seems like if Joe Burrow does not play well, then it is impossible for the Bengals to win. I will say part of this sits on the hands of the Bengals organization. They have not done a good enough job keeping talent around Burrow to make his game excel. Letting go of Joe Mixon was not the best choice. Having contract disputes with Chase is not a good idea, and I really do feel bad for Joe Burrow in these situations. It's not his fault that he was drafted to a team that has consistently had a joke of a front office. The Bengals are a team that has frequently had the quarterback play to be a dangerous team, but their front office can't get it together. They wasted Carson Palmer, they wasted Andy Dalton, and now with the most naturally talented quarterback in their franchise history, they appear to be getting ready to waste yet another promising career. I want to make it clear I am not making this video to hate on Joe Burrow. I just feel like he is so capable of getting on the level of some of the best quarterbacks of all time, and it's frustrating to see him struggle. I think at his current pace, he is on track to have a career more like Andrew Luck than Tom Brady, a fantastic quarterback who could compete with the best of them that is held back by a team that won't put the pieces in place to win alongside battling serious injuries. Even comparing stats between the two quarterbacks shows an alarming trend of similar streaky performance cut short by injury. I also feel for the Bengals fans, their franchise has kept them in a situation where they have hope every year that is usually cut short in a dramatic fashion. It is also just an unfortunate fact that he is playing in a division that has always prided themselves on elite defense. Some of the worst performances of his career came against the Steelers, Browns, and Ravens, while some divisions focus more on outscoring opponents rather than preventing them from scoring. The AFC North is not a fun place to be a quarterback. Having to play TJ Watt twice a year sucks. Having to face the Ravens defense twice a year also sucks. If he was in a division like the NFC West that seems more focused on offense than defense, we may be having a different discussion. I also think this has to do with his injury issues. The Steelers, Ravens, and Browns are known for being hard-hitting teams. For 6 games a year, he has to contend with players trying to knock him out of the season. This season, he has not played horribly. He is on track for another 4,000-yard season with about 30 touchdowns. However, one thing that will also hurt his legacy is his inability to close out games. The Bengals are currently 1-3, and when you look at Joe Burrow's stats, it's hard to understand just how they can't close out these games. In the first 4 games of the year, he has 978 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That is a great start to the season, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your stats look if you miss the playoffs. I know football is a team game, and it's not on Joe Burrow to single-handedly push the team across the finish line. Even against Washington, where he had 320 yards and 3 touchdowns, they still weren't able to close it out and walk away with a victory. He needs to learn how to close out these close games. Overall, I do really believe Joe Burrow has everything he needs to be a consistent top 5 QB in the league. He has the accuracy, he has the drive. He just has to stop getting injured and develop his arm strength a bit more. I do think if he can make these changes, then he can truly become one of the most legendary quarterbacks of all time. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you taking a second to press the like button. We post football videos like this 3 times a week and would really appreciate you subscribing as well, because we're trying to get 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Thank you all for watching.